So before we get into this review, I just want to take a moment to explain that I've kind of been MIA for the last 6 weeks. I'm on the mend now, thank goodness. I feel human again, and I have a whole host of videos that are backlogged right now that I hope to get out. And of course, any of you all that are subscribed that stuck with me during this time, I appreciate it. I will be back to a regular publishing schedule soon. I just need to make sure I sort out my health first. And in other news, we did partner with a really cool company. We're going to be able to give away some products on the channel. Don't worry, Hill Phantom has not sold out. In fact, I told them my demands and they said absolutely cool. So they wanted to give me 15% of each sale, and I said I'd rather spin that around and say give us a 15% coupon. I assume we'll have something like Hill Phantom as a coupon code, and you guys will get 15% off. It's crazy, like I have some sort of rider or something. So I'm really happy. Really neat products in the makerspace for kids and for big kids like me alike. So if you're not subscribed or you want to be notified, hit the bell. That out of the way now, let's get on to the build desk. Pimoroni, potato, I don't care. I like to say Pimoroni. So this is from Pimoroni and we're going to build it. Let's go. Now on to the fun stuff, the actual build. So this is the MVME Base from Pimoroni. They're a UK company. I've been working with them for years. I have a lot of their cases. They make really cool passive cooling cases and a lot of different boards. Now this is an underhat, as I mentioned. It doesn't go on top, it goes underneath. And then it holds different size MVMEs in here. So let's get into this kit really quickly. You have your little feet here, and that is just to stick on the bottom of it if you're going to stick it somewhere. I'm actually putting this in a server rack that I'll show you at the end of the video. Comes with some screws. There's a couple different sizes. We'll walk through those screws. Also comes with this little ribbon cable here. The ribbon cable is just going to be used to connect the NVMe to the PCI slot of the Raspberry Pi. And one of the things to mention about the PCI slot of the Raspberry Pi is it's designed to use a Gen 2 NVMe. But obviously this is a Gen 4, but it can run lower. We're going to set in the firmware after we get this built. A little bit of a hack, unofficial hack, although it's not too crazy. A lot of people are using it, so it's well tested, to make this run at Gen 3 speeds. So we'll get the most out of this that we can out of that port. Before we move forward, one of the things to mention is they sell a kit that comes with hard drives. You're going to want to check the documentation on the website because not all NVMe drives are compatible with this NVMe base. So you're definitely going to want to make sure if you're buying one on your own that you're getting the correct hard drive with this model so that it will work, or you can bundle it. I've done a couple bundles. This is my fourth one, I think. I know that this Crucial P3 Plus works, so I went ahead and grabbed this one as well. But again, a kit is a good option. Obviously, I have the Raspberry Pi 5 here as well, and the official active cooler. So on top, we're going to be putting the active cooler. Eventually, what my plan is to take the active cooler off, and I got something for WaveShare, which is a power over Ethernet adapter to run the Raspberry Pi 5. At the end of this, I'll show you how I put it in my server rack. But that's a key component for me because this way I don't have to power it. So inside the kit, continuing on, we have a couple different screw bolts and standoffs. You have some of these small ones. Now these small ones are going to be used just to attach it to the board to the actual Raspberry Pi. Nuts here and a medium-sized screw. Now you're going to need 2 of these bolts in this medium-sized screw. This combination right here is going to be used to attach the NVMe to the board itself. So the medium-sized screw and the 2 bolts, so we'll put those aside. Then you'll have, as I mentioned, the base screws, and these are the shortest ones. We'll separate those out real quick just so we all have it in order. These are standoffs and risers, and these are just basically going to stand between the board and the Raspberry Pi just to elevate it a little bit. So those will go over in the pile with the base screws. Then you have some of these longer screws, and these longer screws, it can be used in the base as well if you're going to do anything with a hat on top of it that you may need to attach. Now that we have everything organized, we'll go on to the build. Let's crack open the SSD here. Give you 2, but you only need one of those medium-sized screws. We're going to put it through here and go ahead and put a bolt on here. So you'll screw this bolt down here first. I just usually hand tighten it. All right, now let's go ahead and put the hard drive back in. We will push this down, and then you're going to take another one of these tiny little bolts, and we're going to put that on top just to secure the drive. All right, that's pretty secure there. Next step is let's go ahead and just get the Raspberry Pi out. So there's our Raspberry Pi. The other thing to note right now is it can be kind of hard to get a SD card in the slot. So I actually recommend flashing Pi OS, preferably 64-bit, unless you have an application that needs 32-bit. Flash the 64 Pi OS onto this card using something like the Raspberry Pi Imager. Once you do that, I like to go ahead and put it in now. And the reason I do that is because when I do select that boot order, I prefer to have it look for the SD card first, because in this situation, when the board is on top, I'd have to unscrew everything if I wanted to make changes to the actual NVMe, or I wanted to flash a new operating system to it. The other thing I can think of is maybe you want to do something like Plex and you want the full, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 4 terabytes on that NVM to store something like your media. You're not too worried about writing to something like Plex or the speed of it booting up. But I like to keep it in there because you'll see when you connect this cord or the ribbon cable from the NVMe to the actual Raspberry Pi, it is a little bit cumbersome to get it in and out. So go ahead and flash it if you haven't done so already. All right, next step is we're going to just put some of these shorter screws in the bottom of this base. And after this, we will put all the standoffs. Then we'll go ahead and screw these standoffs onto these. Those are just loosely on. Now we're going to come over to the plugging in the ribbon cable. Now the ribbon cable itself, it's important to know which side this curve goes on, and of course you have one smaller end and one wider end. The wider end is actually going to go to your board itself. Now when you connect this board, PCI-E slot is right here. So if we look how this is going to be with this PCI-E slot, it's going to look something like that. So just know that you got to line this up correctly. So the skinny end is going into the Pi, like so. And then this end will wrap back around and connect to the board. All right. So one of the things that you can do is connect it like so. And they actually recommend doing it this way. So go ahead and open up this slot here, and it's just a little black lever right here that you can flip open. We're going to insert this in there. Once we get it seated in there, I'm going to fold that flap down. I like to just give it a quick visual, make sure it's pretty lined up, nice and tidy. So now if this is going to flap over to here, and we're going to have to connect it like this. So what you need to do on the Raspberry Pi is pull up this lever, and then this slides in behind it. You might not be able to see this on camera. Do my best. Just make sure it's lined up correctly and evenly across the top there. It likes to tilt to one side or the other sometimes. Okay, you'll actually have it slide in. You'll feel it when it's down. Try not to bend it as best you can. It's not a huge deal, but probably best if you try not to bend it. Right now that we have it connected, we will just fold it on top of itself. Line it up with those other holes. We'll take the remaining smaller screws, screw those into the posts. Then I save the last and tricky one, which is by the GPIO pins. It always gives me trouble, but sometimes we get lucky. Let's check the ribbon cable. Looks pretty good. Got our SD card in already, and that's there. So completed, you can see nice small footprint, not too much higher in stack volume, but really slick unit, put together well. Last piece, if you're going to do it, just these little rubber feet go in the corners here. That way it won't slide around if you're just going to have it set in open air. The other thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and attach the cooler as well. So this is the official Raspberry Pi cooler. I think it's pretty awesome. I actually had designed it. Got some thermal tape on the back, pretty easy. There's these little spring loads here, and these spring loads just push down into these holes. So you just need to line it up correctly. And that should be good there. And push down on the spring-loaded little plastic screws. Now the last thing you got to do is just hook up the fan connector. There is a little piece here it's covering the power port for the fan. Just got to click that off there and go ahead and connect the power connector for the fan, and that will kick on when it gets above a certain threshold. I forget what the default is, but I just typically don't mess with it. I'm sure you could go in and mess with it with the Pi, but I find it keeps it pretty cool. It's going to snap in. Make sure it's connected really well. And I just think overall it's a slick little package. So this is my new server rack, and I'll link this down below, but this is a 1U server bay, like I said, that holds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different Raspberry Pis. Now it's actually designed to hold a 2.5 inch traditional SSD, but it was not designed to fit the Pimoroni Base. So I need to make some modifications, and you'll notice here I just simply screw these out as individual bays for your Raspberry Pi. One of the things is you'll notice it has these standoffs. So when I put this on top, it doesn't work with this particular model. And of course, you know, this company didn't design it to be used with the Pi Base. But what I can do is make some modifications to this by just removing some of these standoffs, drilling some holes in the bottom, and then attaching my Pimoroni. And what that will give me is a really nice NAS setup for this system I have, or if I just want to have an individual Pi cluster or have individual testing machines, this makes it really easy and convenient to service. And as I mentioned, there's enough room on top here as well to add on that power over Ethernet adapter I had. So right now, we gotta go make some sparks. Oh, that's so satisfying when you get to grind on metal, throw some sparks. But nonetheless, we've got this fixed up. I didn't film this part, but what I did is, you can see I attached it to this bracket here. And if you recall, we used those small little screws to go up from the bottom of the Pimoroni Base into the Pi. I unscrewed that and I screwed into the bottom where I drilled the holes on this plate. Now, one of the things I will note that if you're going to do this is I actually had to use a little bit longer bolts, if you will, that I had laying around the house. So you may have to get some extra bolts there that are the same size. You can check the documentation in terms of what size those screws are. I don't know what they are metrically off the top of my head, but just make sure they're a little bit longer. So this way you can go through this case and it's mounted quite snugly
And again, you can see here, hopefully on camera, there's enough room on top here where I'll be able to set a hat on top for that power over Ethernet, slide it into that server rack I showed you, and man, I can't wait till it's completely done. Now that we got that all attached, we need to do a couple things on the software side. Head over to the Pimoroni website, go to the base section, and scroll down to the bottom and you'll see a couple things that we need to do. But in summary, what we're trying to do is make sure that the EEPROM is updated to the latest version so that we can select our boot order to make sure we're booting from that MVME. That's going to be our fastest boot time by far. Then we're actually going to edit the config.txt file. We're going to add just a simple line at the bottom that's going to enable that Gen 3 hard drive speed. And if you're like me and you already put in your SD card and it already has the operating system burned to it, well, now you can actually use something called an SD copier inside of the operating system to just make a copy of that OS, place it on your NVMe, then we can go into Raspberry Pi config and we can edit the boot order. And that's up to you. Like I said, what I like to do is have it look for the SD card first. If it's not present, then boot from the NVMe. But for you, you may want it to just directly boot from your hard drive. So you can set that in the boot options through advanced configurations as well. I'll show you all that now. All right, now that you're inside of your Raspberry Pi, or if you've SSH in, that's fine too. Go ahead and open your terminal. Once you're in your terminal, the first thing you want to do is do sudo apt get update. We just want to make sure the Raspberry Pi is updated, and that part is sudo. The next thing we want to do is put in sudo apt get upgrade to upgrade our operating system. This may have some updates. Hit yes. That's just going to allow those updates to go through, and it's going to go through and push us to the latest operating system. So this will take a minute. We'll just wait for this to finish, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, once that's done, it's a really good idea to do sudo reboot. Now I've already done that, and we're ready to go on to the next step. Now the next step that we want to do is actually make sure that we're running the correct EEPROM update. So we're going to go ahead and type in sudo raspberry config. Most everyone who messes with the Raspberry Pi should certainly be familiar with this interface, but the first thing we want to do is go to update this tool to the latest version. It's going to walk us through that, pull anything down that we may need. It's going to reload that for us. Now let's go ahead and get out of that, hit finish. Now we're just going to run a quick update to make sure that that EEPROM update is actually done correctly. So go ahead and paste in sudo rpi-eprom -update, and that'll just say that it's up to date. So now we're ready to go ahead and move on to the next step. Now instead of setting our boot order right now, we're going to go ahead and enable that PCIe 3 mode. Now in order to do that, we need to nano boot firmware config.txt. So I'm going to do sudo, because I'm not the super user right now, so I need to do sudo nano /boot /firmware /config.txt. Once I'm here, scroll all the way to the bottom, and right after the all, we're going to cut and paste from the Pimoroni website, and that is DTPARAM equals PCIe EX1-Gen E3. Like I said, just go ahead and copy and paste it. All right, so now hit Control X, Y for yes, and enter. And now we've enabled that PCI mode. Now the next step I'm going to do again before the boot is we're going to install gparted. So let's see, I think that is sudo apt install gparted, and hit yes. All right, that should have installed gparted. So if we go here and look for tools, gparted, it will ask you to auth in, and I need to look at my password. And yes, I still use paper passwords. Let's see here. This one is probably super crazy. Okay, in order to fully initialize this, we actually need to create a partition table. We are going to do, let's just do MS-DOS for now. It'll get erased anyways. Hit OK. And then come in and hit right-click new. Oh, I don't know why it is. Something is definitely wrong with my keyboard here. All right, let's do maximum size, ext4. All right. Add, oh, I messed up. We have to hit apply all operations. apply. It'll go through and get that device ready for us. All done. All right, now what we should be able to do is close this out. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is go start accessories. I think it's under SD copier. So if we go to SD copier, what we're gonna do is copy that operating system, and we're going to copy it from our card into our MVME start. It's gonna warn you that it's gonna erase everything, and then it'll take care of the rest. And then just a waiting game, and in a few minutes, we'll have the operating system that we had on our SD card. We'll actually have it on our MVME. And lastly, we're gonna set the raspberrypi config, the ability to boot from the MVME. Now that we have that complete, we are ready to move on to sudo raspi-config, and we'll go down to advanced options. In advanced options, we want to go to A4, which is boot order. This is where you can make your own decision. Again, not to harping on it, but I like the SD first, then to fail back to the MVME. So for me, it's card boot from SD if available, otherwise boot from MVME. That is B1. A lot of you will probably want to go to B2, which is boot from NVMe, but otherwise boot from USB or SD. So I will leave it at 1. You can change it if you'd like. Once that updates, hit OK, hit finish. Hit no, we don't want to reboot right now. We actually want to shut down. So we're going to go to sudo shutdown -h now, -h now, and that'll shut down our Raspberry Pi. And now in a perfect world, I'm going to remove the SD card, and we're going to see if this thing boots up. And if you can see over my shoulder on that small monitor back there, it did boot up just fine. So overall, not a bad install process, and certainly quite cool that you're going to get full Gen 3 speeds out of this NVMe now. It's running, it boots up so quickly, and I can't recommend it enough. Also, of course, this wonderful server rack I got. Just a really nice way to keep all your Pis organized and in a nice stack. And of course, if you have a home lab, a lot of really cool things you can do with it. So I'll leave the links in the description. I highly recommend this device. I've actually had one running for over a month, solid, no shutdowns, no issues, still fast as the first day I put that MVME drive in. So I highly recommend this if you're a nerd like me, or perhaps you're looking to build out something like a private NAS, which is one of my goals, and I'll have more of that coming on this channel. Now also remember, we have now a sponsorship from a pretty cool company. Again, they're not swaying any of my opinions. I have not sold out. We're going to give you some free giveaways as well as some coupon codes so you can get discounts if you decide to order any of the kits that I will have upcoming on the next couple episodes. So if that's something you're into, I'll mix it in also with a bunch of different reviews on some camera gear I got. And maybe even throw in an adventure. If I end up going somewhere kind of crazy, I'll bring you along. Anyways, I hope you will like and subscribe. My name's Hill Phantom. I'll see you next time.